G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of Unlocking the Secrets to Expanding Human Potential. I'm Greg Riley, Michael McNair. Good evening to you.
Good evening, brother. How are you this afternoon, this evening?
We are great. We haven't done this yet. We've been talking about going down this path for a long time. About time. And I thought, well, let's just start from the top, right? And go straight to Jez, right? So, well, let's just building up to it. Let's go straight to Jez with that. So, basically, yeah, I've got we went through Jez's gym. So Jeremy Takody is our interview tonight, and he is a wealth of knowledge on a lot of different things. He's got a great background, but really he's got this amazing framework called the 7 Intentions, and it is literally gold. So I thought we're getting here to talk about all things consciousness, reality, subconscious mind, conscious mind, thought patterns, behavior changes, all that kind of stuff, because he's got some absolute ripper stuff. So Jez, welcome.
Thanks for having me. This has been a long time coming. We've sort of been circling around this for a while. So I'm excited to be here, and hopefully I can be of service, and your listeners get some value.
Oh yeah, I seriously can't wait. We've booked 90 minutes for this, and there's no chance there's going to be 90 minutes.
We're going to be hard pressed.
we're going to get. Let's just say we're going to get some way into this. This will be volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. So.
Yeah.
So just tell us a bit about
sidetracked.
Yeah, we do. Tell us a bit about yourself, mate, and who you are and what makes you tick.
Cool. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a coach. I've been in the coaching space for probably around 30 years. Initially through the martial arts, and then got into life coaching and business coaching. And I've been very, very blessed through the martial arts specifically to come across lots of different, very, very valuable insights into the mind-body connection, which I've just loved and explored, and really developed some very, very what I feel of quite practical applications for some quite metaphysical or mystical, even esoteric type of psychology. And I've been able to test those philosophies and ideas in the real world in my own life, as well as with clients for the better part of at least 20 years. So
it's the stuff we love.
Yeah, it's good to take ideas and actually apply them and see how they work in reality, because sometimes we see truth, whether it's in a meme, whether it's in someone's comment, or just we see things, but then how do we apply it to life? Like, how do we actually make our lives consistently better? And so I think taking things back to reality is very, very valuable, especially when you're transitioning between, concepts like consciousness and the nature of reality, and what does it all mean? Like, that can be very abstract. So it's good to be able to go bandwidth-wise, quite abstract, but then take it back to the practical for things that can be measured and experienced. And
I love that you said that. You just destroyed my first question. It was basically, so what? Because, we spend so much time trying to engage and unpack what we are spiritually and our higher self and purpose and meaning. And often we do a lot of that on our own in isolation. And if we come up with these answers, taking it out into the world, taking it for a test drive. So, yeah, I think maybe let's not jump ahead, but I want to dive into that.
Well, look, it's the old cliche of, like, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
That's it.
After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Yeah, and that rings true in my life. Maybe.
So what I like about your stuff, Jez, is exactly that. Is that you're taking very, very deep and philosophical, metaphysical concepts themselves, and being able to relate them to everyday life. And I've been through, your 7 Intentions through some of the stuff we've done. And that's what I love about it, is the relatability to be able to take some stuff that's quite esoteric and make it very much plug into everyday life. Because I know people kind of have that issue with these constructs of, thought patterns. And when you start delving into, some of this stuff, people just get lost. And the beauty about what your stuff is, it just sits straight in.
Grounded.
Well, I mean, sometimes that's because the student's ready as much as the information. So, the other side of it is I've been very lost myself. And so in the process of trying to make sense of things, having that experience of it not making any sense and then making sense of it in a way that's, practical and applicable. I think that, at least for a narrow bandwidth, because obviously I don't know everything about everything. I know like a grain of sand of what's actually out there, but at least being able to apply it in a way that, people can ideally understand and then at least attempt to apply in some meaningful way. And really that's the value of anything, is like, is the actual application of it. As otherwise it's just a bit of mental masturbation type of thing.
True. So how did it come about? Yeah. So how did it sort of come about? So I know a bit about your background, and how did it evolve? And then we'll get into how it relates. So tell us a bit about how it came to you, and this I call it framework. I don't know what you call it, but it's a pretty special thing. Yeah.
So I call it a metacognition tool, and look, over the years I've called it different things as I've gone through different phases in my own life. I've called it the 7 attentions. I've called it the warrior's tree. If you were to draw it out visually, it looks a lot like the Kabbalistic tree of life. But for me, how I came into an understanding of these concepts was initially through the martial arts. And I've been very, very fortunate to have the journey that I've had in the martial arts. Probably my earliest memory was seeing a karate demonstration. I think I was maybe 4 or 5 years of age, and I saw a gentleman break a brick. And to me at the time, it was just unbelievable. It seemed totally impossible. And so I went home, and my parents have told me I was trying to break everything. So they didn't take too kindly to my initial interest in the martial arts. But later, I was raised in the Mormon faith, and my Sunday school teacher, a gentleman by the name of Morris Goulet, he was a black belt in karate and had also studied many different styles of kung fu. And as soon as I found out that he was a black belt, I asked him, how do you break a brick? And I think I was probably 8 or 9 years of age at the time. And his answer, really, I didn't appreciate it at the time, but, as you go on later on in life, sometimes you recognize there's these moments in time where an idea or a seed is formed, and that later has really had a massive impact on my life. And in asking him, how do you break a brick? He basically said, look, the first thing you need to do is know how to do it. Like, you actually have to have the knowledge of what type of brick, how to set the brick up. Like, you actually have to have some knowledge. Then secondly, you actually have to prepare your body. So it's not enough to just know how to do it intellectually. You actually have to physically prepare yourself to actually have the capacity to do it. But most importantly, and this was really the message that I think was the part that made the biggest difference for me, was he said that in order to break the brick, you have to be able to break it in your mind first. Because if it's not possible in your mind, then it's not going to be possible in reality. And that's a pretty deep sort of idea. And at the time,
especially for an 8-year-old.
Yeah. I was just like, oh, wow. So it was a practical lesson in the sense of, he didn't just say, like, oh, if you believe it's possible, then you can do it. He was like, no, you actually have to have some knowledge around this, and you actually have to physically prepare to do it. But equally importantly, you have to be able to do it in your mind. And that was very powerful. He did also tie it back into some scripture, classic scripture that, again, years later, I realized is actually deep truth to do with seek and you'll find, knock, and, it'll be open unto you. Like, and I'm butchering the scripture, but the message was, if you have something that you truly believe in or you're passionate about, that you'll find the way. Like, if you've got a pure intent and pure heart around whatever it is. In my case, I was like, I want to break a brick, which is probably, a bit silly, but yeah, that lesson, he was like, look, if you really believe in something, you'll get an answer, especially when you're clear in yourself what the question is. And the answer may come to you in a voice. It might be like an image or like a picture in your mind. Sometimes someone will come to you by coincidence or circumstance with something that relates to it, that leads you on a path to getting the answer or receiving the thing that you've thought of. Or you may not get the thing that you were initially asking about, but you end up receiving something that is later in hindsight ends up being the perfect match for the intent or the actual asking of what you're asking for. And again, I was pretty young and just really took that idea to heart of like, okay, if you have a question or you put your mind to something, yes, it becomes possible. You do need to know and get knowledge around it, and you do have to prepare yourself. But if you're really clear, sometimes someone will bring the answer to you. You'll get the inspiration, or you'll get some other thing that ultimately gets you what you're asking for, but might not be what you were expecting.
That's some super powerful wisdom you just shared right there. I think, and Greg's heard me say this a lot of time, you get, so when you're pure of heart and you've set your intention, you'll get exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. And it might not be the thing you want, and it might not come the way you expected it, but it will come to you. Yeah. And I also have a belief that the patterns repeat. So if you weren't at the right state of awareness, it'll come to you in a different form, and it'll keep coming until you've hit that level to kind of, bring that knowledge, information, that experience on board. And it's fascinating, and I love that so much. And when you take it for a test drive, this is the reality stuff that you can test this stuff in the real world, because your heart won't tell a lie. Your heart knows if you set that intention and it's pure. Yeah. Then it's just a bit of a waiting game.
Well, sometimes the universe likes speed. That's true. Sometimes things do take, whether you call it like a law of gestation, but there are sometimes literally within seconds, like if you get clear and you're just like, okay. And then, with technology now, we're recognizing these connections that can be quite difficult to explain otherwise, where someone maybe reaches out, or maybe you were thinking of someone, and then that you bump into them.
The synchronicities. Yeah. A lot of people talk about it.
It definitely is a thing. So so my initial discovery of sort of this intro into the mind-body connection really was through the martial arts, and I was very, very, very fortunate to when I did a little bit of training with Morris, but it was very, very minimal. But what he did do was he gave me a number of books, and one of them, I've still got them. I've still got the 3 books that he gave me. One was a series of books on karate by a guy called Bruce Tenga. And the other one was called The Secrets of Shaolin Temple Boxing. And I just fell in love with this idea and the insights into this universal energy and connection with the universe. And in that book, it had descriptions about the elements and the relationship between man and the elements. And again, at that age, I just kind of fell in love with the mystery of that was in very, very traditional martial arts, but initially through meeting him and through the books that he gave me. And it really did, it set me on a path of really seeking out different teachers in the martial arts, different practices. I had a real thirst for it. So that was really the initial introduction. And then it was several years later that I had a series of meditative experiences, which it just, I don't know how far down the rabbit hole we want to go at this point, but
all the way.
So hang on back.
Okay, so there's some very simple meditative exercises. You'll find these in many different traditions that are not just in the martial arts, but they're in many different forms, where you do something quite simple to still your mind. That's kind of the idea of it, where you're learning to recognize that your mind is very active, and there are different activities that you can do to bring you to face your own mind. And there's literally hundreds and hundreds of methods, but the exercise that I was doing was to sit and look at could be anything in your field of view. I like to play at a creek that's in Tasmania. It's called Lenna Valley Creek. I used to go down there and play, build dams, and just love spending time down there. So I had this little spot where I would meditate. And I had this experience where I was sitting down, and the task was to look at what I could see in terms of what was in front of me, and then to close my eyes and make an imagination of the scenery. And part of that was just to give my mind something to do, because as you know, if you sit and do nothing, your mind just goes all over the place.
Fills the space.
Yeah. So I'd done this several times in this same spot, sitting down, imagining what I could see when my eyes were open. And there was this one particular session where I could see a rock that was half submerged across from me that was in the creek. And so closing my eyes, I could see in my mind's eye, just obviously imagining the scenery, and then focused my attention on this particular rock. And the idea of the meditation was to open yourself to, without words, to feel and see and appreciate whatever it was that you chose to focus on. And again, this is it's a very simple exercise just to learn to direct your monkey mind, basically. And so I had this experience. I've got this in my mind and I can see the rock. And then the idea of the exercise was to sort of step into the place of the thing that you were focusing on. So stepping basically my mind into being the rock, and then sitting as the rock in the stream in my mind, feeling what it was like to be the rock, and just imagining that sort of as a thought. And I really had this sense just for a few moments of just really just peace and connectedness. And it's at this point that whatever words that I'm going to use, they're not going to convey. So yes. I'm going to do my best, because when you have an experience like the one that I'm going to describe, when you come out, you end up sounding like a complete idiot.
To some people.
Well, yeah. And so I had this experience sitting there, imagining myself as the rock. And I just really felt that I was really one with everything. Like I could just feel that what the rock was made of was made as the same stuff that the water was made of, that the trees around me, we were all just made of the same stuff. And that the words that I would use is like a tune. I could feel like a tune that was being played. The rock had a particular tune or a hum, not that it was a sound, but it was like just a feeling. And the water, it was the same stuff, but it was just humming it a slightly different way, but it was all the same thing. And I just got lost for just a moment in the oneness of the idea of it. And then I had this thought to turn to look at myself. And so I was in my mind imagining myself as the rock, and I turned to face myself sitting across the creek, looking at myself being the rock, imagining myself. And I had this moment, and even now I'm getting goosebumps. Awesome. I don't know if you've ever gotten two mirrors and you turn a mirror to face a mirror and it opens up infinity. That was the sensation. Like I saw myself, seeing myself, and it just broke me. Like I just went everywhere. And
perfect.
It was very, very difficult to explain. I had all sorts of ideas and thoughts and precognitions come through, but I couldn't hold on to anything. And I ended up just having this just overwhelming disintegration feeling, like trying to catch every part of the reflection in the mirror going back on top of itself into infinity through everywhere. And I definitely had this sense of timelessness and spaciousness and like just being consumed by that awareness experience. And I must have passed out or gone to sleep, because I woke up and I think I'd hit my head. I had a bump on my head, and I was just out of it. So I staggered home. I couldn't speak for a couple of days. Like I couldn't even make words. And I was really left with this awareness, this actual, not just an awareness, but like really knowing that what I was not my body, because in that moment of dissolving, my body was gone, but I was still there. And so I had this very critical awareness that what I was not my body, and it was not my mind. And that even though the relationship was there and coming to an ordinary experience, I could feel, okay, well, I'm here. But it was just this insight that what it felt like I really was everything everywhere. And again, it just sounds so dumb to say, like, there literally isn't the language to put anywhere near sort of the the shattering.
We get it, bro.
We get it.
The language is so limited. That's so beautiful. Yeah. That awareness is special.
Yeah, it's like, oh God, but it's just like, it's like, it's not nothing you could say is enough. So yeah, so I was left with this, like, what the fuck? Like, what happened?
Yeah, now what?
Now, well, okay. And what does it mean? How am I in my body? Like, if I'm not my mind and I'm not my body, but here I am in my body, like, how is it that I'm in my body? And I just became obsessed with that question. How is my awareness in my body when I know that I'm not my body and I'm not my mind? And so
actually, guys, just stop there for a second. You made a really, really good point, which a lot of people don't get. You're not your body, but you're not your mind. That second part's really important, because a lot of people don't get that part because they actually think they're their mind.
Yeah, because we're caught up in a state of consciousness or a level of awareness, and there are different ways of saying the idea, but yeah, we're caught up. And if you look at what the brain is actually doing very rapidly for most people, ordinary state, we are referencing our memory as a very, very fast process mechanism by which we're filtering the present moment. So most people aren't actually present in the present moment. They're comparing in super, super fast speed your interpretation of your personal history. And so
I love it. I love it.
So by default, you're identified with the identity that's formed through memory. And I call that the first attention. And it's a state that we all operate in. We move in and out of these different states throughout different levels of consciousness. But the first attention is predominantly there to keep us safe. It functions extremely well, but it's like air. Like we don't notice we're breathing. We don't notice it's there until maybe something happens and it's cut off. But, this filtering process that's going on, the first layer of it, as I've come to understand it, and I'm please, you guys don't believe anything I say with this. Like, this stuff is all debatable, and we can either experience it or question it. But from my experience and my understanding, that we are comparing the present moment to our previous personal history. And so the problem with that is we get caught up in the identity, and we're processing the current moment through the identity of our memory, as opposed to other alternatives, which when you start to pay attention and notice things, you'll start to realize that when you change your perception, what you perceive actually can change.
Good stuff. Like this.
I can just hear people screaming at the thing now. Jez, tell us how to do this. No, it's a lot. Hey, woo back a bit.
That's in the next episode.
I don't know. It was. I wouldn't recommend it. It was bad. It was not a pleasant experience. Like, I know it sounds, blah, 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 but it was like, I don't know.
It's a paradigm shift.
It was not cool.
It's like someone's peeled back the veil and given you a glimpse of infinity and an eternity all at once, and then said, but we're not giving you the operating system. You go work it out.
Pretty much. So
I can relate.
So it's just evolved from there. You've just, as time's gone on, it's unveiled itself to you, or?
So I was obsessed with that question, and I had up to that point, anytime I'd really put my mind to something and truly put my heart to it, that either things had happened, or I'd learn it, or I'd find out, or whatever. And so, innocently or not, I asked myself the question, how am I actually here? And then bit by bit, I got downloads. And that's kind of the only way to say it, where I would get flashbacks of the experience, and I would revisit what limited sort of recollection I could hold on to of that experience as a representation. But I would just get huge downloads, and I've still got many of the diaries. I would just write for hours and hours and hours, and then afterwards I would sit back and actually read what I'd written, and it was just, just imagine just at like a couple of volumes of books, like just being dumped in your head, and then you just like trying to get the words out. Now, a lot of the time I would get stuck with what language to use, but it was still just, it was literally just like downloads. And I was left with a very clear image, and I was able to draw the image out. And later on, in showing that to other people, they're like, you've drawn the tree of life, you've drawn Kabbalah. And, it's possible that I'd seen it, growing up in a religious family, but I certainly hadn't had any direct teaching or knowledge around that. And so using that framework, I was able to draw a lot of it out and write ideas, but it wasn't cohesive. And I'd get lost in it. Like, I'd get a dump of information, and so I'd be write, and then I just, and I couldn't keep up. And so it was all over the place. And so it wasn't actually until a couple of years later, and I'd been writing and, making sense of it. But it was still, I searched out different teachers by then around different areas and started to adopt different languaging around it. But it's still, I couldn't explain it in a complete cohesive manner like I can now. Apparently, or not. That's probably debatable. Because sometimes I hear myself, I'm like, you're a fucking idiot. But I had this opportunity to do, because I've been doing a lot of writing, and a lot of these ideas I would express with writing. And I had an opportunity to do a writer's workshop with a guy called Bryce Courtney, who wrote The Power of One. So he was down in Tasmania at the time researching the potato factory. And he held a series of workshops around writing. And one of the exercises that he got us to do was actually very similar to another meditation practice that I really liked, where you basically build a sacred space in your mind, and you actually create a mental journey to go to this sacred place that you design. And the idea of it would be that you would calm your mind, and essentially it's a self-hypnosis technique where you would go into this place and you'd have different anchors that you would reference to get you into state. And that within your sacred space, you could call in the subject matter that you were writing about. He's like, oh, you can put a movie screen in there so you can watch the book or the whatever it is that you're writing and experience it. Or you can call people in, you can call characters in, you can call real people in that you want to speak to about the subject or whatever. And he just had this really great self-hypnosis method of getting yourself into state to unlock these creative ideas. And one of the sessions, he brought in a clinical hypnotist, and I can't remember her name, but she actually took us through an induction process that magnified the effects of this. And so what I did, it was something that Bryce said kind of offhand, and even now it sounds just dumb saying it, but he had said, you can bring different people in. They could be from the past, they could be from the future. So I imagined, look, in a possible future, there's a version of me that understands this stuff. And so I imagined myself coming from the future and basically sat down and had a conversation with myself. And it was just like unlocking a key. It was just, I had the languaging, how to layer it, what to call different things. And it was just like, the penny dropped. It was absolutely in a hypnotic, sort of trance state, but it was like very similar to how we were sitting here. And it's funny, I'm looking at myself in terms of the screen here, but it was this very surreal experience. And whether it was a thing or not, it was about 12 months ago that I actually did the reverse. I went back and taught my past self to close the loop, because I had this awareness of, maybe there's an open loop here. So I actually went down and did the imagination of teaching my younger self. So that's kind of like, like even when you start saying things like this to people, like, it's like, okay, look, I'm fully cognizant of like, this is in my head. Maybe it's a vivid imagination, all those sorts of things. I'm open to questioning myself around it. But over the years, there's just been like so many profound experiences and working with this process with so many different people across all different walks of life, and where elements of these insights, and we really haven't gone into them yet. I'm just kind of going into like a backstory. There's some very powerful applications to it.
Yeah, it's gold. We've hardly started. We haven't even got through the first attention.
We haven't got to the first question yet.
No.
That's just for the last.
It's magic, Jez. Yeah, really good stuff.
So I feel very blessed. I feel I've lived a bit of a double life. It's kind of very, very strange. And like it's been, yeah, I've been very, very lucky, and having an interest in this and being able to articulate some of these concepts, and have discussions with, some absolutely brilliant people have given me over the years deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper practical insights into what's going on, what it means or doesn't mean, and then how to actually apply it for different experiences in a very step-by-step sort of manner. So yeah, so I feel very, very blessed, and I'm still learning about it. Like, in full clarity, there are elements of the tree, as I call it, where I feel I have not embodied what I've glimpsed. In full disclosure, there is insights that I've had where I'm like, okay, that's in my head, but I am not an embodiment of that concept just yet. And so I feel like I still have a lot to explore and understand and actually embody with what's possible with the ideas that are sort of part of the insight.
It's such a good word for it.
Look, it's hard to explain, and that's you've summed it up pretty well, Michael. I've had conversations about this, and my wife always gets the shits with me when she says, hey, what happens? I can't explain it. Like, you're in this place of oneness and everything with the universe, and your whole identity strips away, and you just can't. There's no human words that can sort of relate to sort of what you're talking about, and that's to actually say that you are beyond your body and beyond your mind. People kind of don't get that, and it's it is hard to explain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very difficult. It's interesting, and that's not even going into any detail about the sorts of things that come up when you're in that state.
Correct.
And the nature of your own awareness within that field, and how quickly you can get sucked down a rabbit hole of things. It's literally worlds within worlds within worlds without end.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just it.
Yeah, get it.
I love the way you explained the breakdown, how it became apparent to you that we were made of the same stuff, and that stuff existed beyond any of the sort of human words that we've got to explain things.
Yeah, there was an agreement going on, like the hum that was going on. Every part was aware of the other part in a sense, and there was a section of awareness there where it felt like if I could hum a different tune, and this is not how you would say it, but if I could change my tune, that the water would become the rock, or the tree would change to be the air, or everything it was intelligent, and it knew what was going on, but it could rearrange itself if you were playing the right tune.
But the fact that you were still aware of your consciousness in that moment, that you were still a part of, but independent of those things at the same time.
Yeah, I think that was just by luck of the nature of the exercise, because the nature of the exercise to make a picture and then go in my mind to make the picture, by the architecture of even that exercise, starts to create some other dynamics that give you a bit more leeway. Whereas when you're doing it, when you're trying to do these sorts of things in ordinary awareness and just with like eyes open, for example, it can be very, very difficult. So even just closing your eyes, or you kind of have to do different things to put yourself in a particular state where anything like that is, well, me anyway. So obviously I can't speak for everybody, but doing those sorts of things when your eyes are open, for me anyway, is still very, very difficult. I have to do things like expand my peripheral vision. So I could do this sort of thing and go wide till I can just see.
Get a sense of space.
and now I'm in emptiness. Okay. And so, you know, I really have to consciously do things like, because my normal eye patterns prohibit the level of consciousness that allows that awareness, in my experience. So it's kind of funny trying to explain these sorts of things to people. They're like, what are you on?
Going to get deeper. So let's get with the first question, right? So we've just
okay.
Right.
That's the warm up. This is the warm up.
This is I'm wording this one different, because most people come in about, what's my purpose and all that kind of stuff, right? So I sort of, reframe it into, what are people seeking and what are people looking for in life? What's the nature of that?
So I think people are aware that there is something within them seeking something. And that's obviously different for everybody, but there's this innate driving life force that's flowing through us that is seeking to experience things. And that, when you start to become aware of it, even just the awareness of it, of the seeking of it, like you may not know what the thing is that you're seeking, but just this being drawn to things, I think that in itself, starts to open up a journey where people start to question things. The other side of things that often happens is people experience trauma, or they experience difficulty or suffering. And then in the trying to make meaning of the suffering or escape from the suffering, they search for meaning. So it's obviously people find the path in many, many different ways, but I believe our innate life force is seeking expression. And that's what that expression is, that how that comes out in your life. That's the art of your life. If you follow that path, that is really, following whatever that life force coming through you is seeking to experience. That's the real mystical sort of life parallel to live into. And it's often when people start to become aware of this, that and pursue it, that they really do find opportunities for a different level of fulfillment compared to what society tells you should make you fulfilled. We have a car and a house and a relationship, and why am I still miserable? People come to these realizations, and obviously different life phases, those realizations are more common. But we all, come to those moments, in different ways. But, people start to realize that the stuff that they thought was going to make them happy isn't actually making them happy. And so they start looking a bit deeper, start paying attention a little bit more. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's...
Well, it does, because it ties into the next, because a lot of the times, and when Michael and I are working with people, is that the thing is that people have, the way we've been brought up and programmed, and from going through schooling, and that is about what is success, what it does look like you said, it's it usually is an external validation of what you've got that determines how successful you are, and what kind of grade you get at school determines how your self-worth is and all that kind of stuff. And it's then going into what is true happiness, and it's all just a cesspool of crap that leaves people in a place of unfulfillment and a void and not worthy and not enough. And like you said before, when you can switch it around and say that the purposes of life is to experience, then it starts to shift everything.
Yeah, it's quite a profound shift.
Yeah, because the experience is everything. The experience is the good, the bad, the ugly, the positive, the laughter, the joy, all that kind of stuff. which you embrace. And as you've articulated before, the soul beyond the body and the mind loves that.
Yeah. And it will,
yeah.
it will actually destroy your body to do it.
Correct.
It doesn't care.
Yeah.
It has no it's unconditional in a sense, but at the same time, it wants what it wants.
It's super profound.
And it will fuck you up if you try and get in the way.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to that point we were saying before. If you don't pay attention and there's a lesson that you need to learn, it'll keep coming back.
Yeah. So I call that a karmic threshold cycle. And part of that happens because we are experiencing the present moment through the lens of our personal history, events in our past that we may have experienced significant emotional, physiological, reactions to, and this is the important bit, and we've made meaning of that. We are inadvertently and subconsciously filtering the present moment through those array of, your personal history. And not only that, but through the myriad of agreements that we have that have been inherited from our parents, from our grandparents, from our, sometimes several generations back. And this is not even talking about epigenetics, where we're actually talking about your genetic code actually carrying some of these, these
that's
dynamics.
The deeper layer. That's episode 3.
Yeah. So, so absolutely, we will tend to recreate lessons, partly because we have made particular meanings in the past, or are using particular belief structures or values, or different rules around how we're doing things. And until we can transcend the rule or the belief, we will be stuck within the cycle of a self-affirming prophecy or self-affirming behavior. For better or worse, we get stuck repeating things. Now, that's not to say you don't progress and then re-experience the thing at a different level. Sometimes we'll run into the same problem, but when you start to really unpack the way your beliefs and values, I call it the fourth attention, those hidden agreements, that you can write them out as word structures, and there's ways of eliciting them and bringing them to light so that your rational mind can see them as well as your consciousness. There's ways of doing that, but essentially you'll keep re-experiencing them unless you can transcend that agreement. It's like the programming of a computer, for example. The software as a code form, it's telling you how to do things. And until you can bring those things to light and remove your faith from like actually disbelieve it, and pull it apart. And there's many different methods for doing that. And then either dissolve it entirely or install a new agreement that serves you for the next layer of your evolution.
I was going to say you've moved into a really good part that I want to focus on now, is the nature of ego and identity and personality, because some of the stuff, and our good friend Andy McMahon, if Andy's listening to this, where you know what I'm talking about here, and some of the work, and this is a bit of a joke between Mike and myself, is, like yours, we've got, our 5D model, but the first part is to, rebuild the identity of the self, the ego part, the three-dimensional part. And then we get to the stage where we go into the next phase of the program, and I say to the clients, that stuff I just taught you in the first part? It's all a lie.
Yeah,
it's all an illusion.
Well, it's not. It's an illusion, but it's not a lie in that the process that you're taking them through. And I may be making an assumption, so correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
The process of teaching people the skill sets to reprogram their identity, even though what they're creating is not real. It's the skill set.
Correct.
So the skills are transferable, even though you start to recognize that the identity is an illusion.
Yeah. Because quite often what we'll do is that I've quite found that I can't take somebody who's sitting there with a self-identity in a personal space in 3D world of I am worthless, I'm not enough, I don't deserve love. Taking him from there into a place of non-duality and beyond the self is a really big jump unless you take a shitload of psychedelics, right?
Yeah.
And dissolve in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like it's a foundation building block to get to the point so you go, okay, right, you're ready to take the next step, which is there's the dissolve of the ego or the personality or the identity. And you know, even that's the wrong word because you need that to, you know, integrate with this world as well. But tell us what, you know, how you sort of, you know, do that side of things and you know, the identity and self identity.
Yeah. So the first attention is essentially, because it's based on your identity and which is largely built by your personal history. Because that is so strong, we do need to understand it and work with it to see it in action, and then also to kind of hack the process by which you can leverage it to your advantage. And so to give this, you know, a couple of different contexts or some examples, there are things that you would do in different roles in your life where you start to realize that who you're actually wearing multiple identities. So you might be a husband, you might be a father, you might be a whatever the label is. And the first attention typically is it is a labeling state. So we already start to realize, okay, I'm not just one fixed identity, I'm actually wearing multiple hats. And so for some people, when they wear too many hats, that actually fragments their personality to the point where they start to become dysfunctional. So sometimes as a coaching role, and again, this could go a lot of different places. Sometimes it's about unifying, or at least bringing to a person's attention already the fact that they have the skill set to have different identity roles in different circumstances. And there's many different studies where even like changing your clothes, it's called enclothed cognition, where putting a person in a uniform for a particular role alters their behavior. And so there are sort of tricks you can use for external cues, and things like your workplace and your workspace and what you wear that really do have a massive impact on who you see yourself to be. But the sort of the first thing really is to, in the context of a client, is meeting them where they are. So wherever their identity or their identities are, is actually try and understand what those identities are doing, because those identities are there for the benefit of the person as a whole, like they're serving a purpose. And so sometimes when people have quite fractured different mental health issues and behaviors that you're like, what, this is ridiculous behavior. When you actually unpack what's going on, they really are doing the best that they can with the tools and the resources that they have. And so really the first thing is just to really just try and meet the client exactly where they're at and try and understand them, like understand what's going on and meet them there. You don't make them wrong. Like it is what it is. Like, and so that first step, as you start to learn more, you really obviously this, building rapport and all of those things come into like a coaching dynamic. But you then, as you learn more about what they're doing, you start to gather information and you get leverage. And you bit by bit, you teach the client, and again, there's many, many different ways, and it depends where they want to go. you teach the client different skill sets and tools and resources that either you lead them through as a coach or you teach them to do on their own, that improves their range of behavioral choices and thinking patterns to create different outcomes. And so, you know, it's a big rabbit hole, but like sometimes when you get to those points where what you're saying, you know, people are having all these different emotions and you know, experiencing different dysfunctions. Really, as a coach, then it's just about really understanding what they're at, where they're at, getting leverage around how they're processing reality. And again, the 7 attentions is just one of many different frameworks for being able to reverse engineer how they're creating their experience. And then understanding the emotional impact or the way they're doing their emotions, like where in the body, you know, all of those sorts of things. And then again, it depends on the context. You want to have like a toolkit where you can go in and really help the client, you know, get the end result. So yes, sometimes maybe using medicine, maybe a shortcut and a very, very, very needed and powerful way of creating a pattern interrupt. But there are other methods. So it really depends on the context and what you're trying to achieve. But the framework of initially the recognizing that, okay, people have an identity and they have different identities depending on the role that they're in, and those different identities, they'll be thinking differently. They'll actually have different physiology. They'll experience their emotions differently. They'll have different resources and behaviors that are available to them in the context of that identity. Even just that insight of seeing that as a coach can be very, very powerful. So then it would be, you can play games. You could unify different identities or help them make bridges between the skill sets that they have as one identity. You teach them different methods of transference, there's so many techniques, it's not funny, but you know, lead them in a place where they can see the transference, and then in them recognizing the transference, they get the crossover. Rather than you telling them, you actually architect different pattern interrupts and experiences where they start to see the resources that they have and reintegrate themselves. And so this process, especially when you're dealing with trauma and dealing with things that do tend to have tend to fracture the personality. Fracture may not be the right word, but, you know, at the very least create physiological impact that is not reachable by the mind in normal ways. Just at least recognizing that dynamic is occurring, and then having, you know, again, different methods and systems where you then approach the healing of, or the integration, and integration is healing in most cases. Even just something as simple as sitting with a client, being where they're at, and hearing them speak their truth on something can be life-altering and healing and totally transformative, even from the perspective of the client just speaking the truth. Even if you weren't there, just them actually being able to articulate, and it may not be the reality, but whatever is their truth around the experience that they've had. Again, these are things that when you recognize each of the layers and levels of consciousness, how powerful some just very, very simple human connection and making space for someone to process through their experience, and then ask them different questions or point them in different directions, or together explore different things. And again, it's a bit weird not having an actual example, but you know, it can be very, very powerful.
I think we get it. Yeah.
But so what is the nature of identity? Why do we have it? What's the purpose?
Okay, so the purpose of identity is to keep us safe. Okay, so if we're to look at how we show up, and I don't want to go sort of again too deep. The nature of reality, each of these levels, I call them the 7 attentions, they are fractal. And so what this means is there are repeating patterns. So for the first attention, your identity, your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, your behavior, though that set creates these repeating patterns throughout your entire consciousness. Mm-hmm. And so the real purpose of our identity is to keep us safe, processing the present moment with a very, very fast, like it's super, super fast, down regulation of data and only filtering out things that are different, like loud noises or sudden movement, and being able to lower the volume, so to speak, of the rest of the data that we're basically deleting, distorting, generalizing, so that basically to keep us safe. Because if we sit in the present moment, like if I sit here now and I actually take in what's around me, like I couldn't stop someone, like if the evolutionary tale is if there's a saber-toothed tiger creeping up to you and you're looking at a flower, witnessing the universe, and lost in the totality of everything, you just got eaten. And so whether it's evolution or divine design, I don't know, but we've evolved with this incredible neurology and physiology that is designed by state, or it appears through state, to keep us safe. And recognizing that first state where you being you in the situation that you're doing, going about your thing, the underlying sort of pattern that's going on is the awareness to be safe. Now, part of the problem with that is often that is fear-based. So to a certain extent, we meaning we notice things more, we tend to notice things more that are painful, or possible dangers. Now, part of the problem with that is that it heightens our awareness to those dangers. Obviously, that's to keep us safe, but our experience, if we get too caught up in our ego identity, one of the negative side effects, because we're looking for those things, is that we start to have a fear-based perspective, especially if we've had real trauma, is that we start to have a fear-based experience and we overreact, or we project, or we imagine things in the future that might happen, that haven't happened, that aren't going to happen, but we get a physiological reaction to it again, because we've got this, physiology and neural pathways that are really there to keep us safe. It's like if I put my hand on a hot plate and I burn myself, the next time I'm going to be that little bit more careful. It's like, oh, that hurts. The next time I'm like, okay. And anytime I'm in someone else's kitchen, it may not be the same design of cooking, but I'll be like, oh, that looks kind of similar to a hot plate. I've got to be careful around that. And again, I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but the role of the identity at its like real core level, it's designed to keep us safe. But when you unpack what's going on, it is pointing your awareness and really, really has a massive impact. And so sometimes when you're getting a result that you don't want, one of the things to look at is reframing that identity. So if we look at who you are now and who you see yourself to be and how you think and how you feel and what your beliefs are and what your behaviors are, that is creating a result. And so that's what a very predictable, your identity, your thoughts, the details around your thoughts, your emotions, those beliefs and values, those internal agreements, they are driving your behavior that is creating your experience. So just those first 5, that is the nature of reality for most people. You don't necessarily need to go, okay, well, what is the what's the part that's observing the body, that's got the belief, that's feeling the thought, and having the thought, that's seeing this experience. Just at a very practical level, those first 5 are very, very useful to understand, to see, okay, this is what result I'm getting. So if I want a different result, who do I need to become? What do I need to think? What are the details around that? What knowledge what language do I use? What's the feelings that I'm making in my body? What meaning does that have? What are the rules around that I would need to be following? What are the habits and behaviors? And all of a sudden, if you've got a desire to be a particular type of person or have a particular experience, and you meet people that are having that reality, by default, if you just by proximity, we have, like, I think it's about 30% of our brain is what we call mirror neurons. You will start to absorb how they are identifying themselves, what language they use, the
energy exchange.
Yeah. So as humans, if we want a particular result, if we can make that map and go, who do I need to become? What's the language of that thing? Like, let's say I want to be a triathlete, and I want to, have run or compete in a triathlon. Seeing myself, okay, I said I am a triathlete. Like, just that language, I am. If you want to unpack what the identity is okay, I am now a triathlete. And then what language? What's the way they think? What are the skill sets? What are the resources, and what are the feelings involved? What are the beliefs? Okay, when I'm feeling this, I've got to push through. You'll start to, especially if you're around other triathletes, you'll be able to model what those things are, and then the habits and behaviors. It becomes possible. And the kind of cliche around this, I think, was Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile. Right. Within a very short period of time, lots of people were able to break that what was seemingly impossible. And so human potential, it depends how far down the rabbit hole you go. It's potentially limitless when you're able to unpack this dynamic. And that's not even talking about using consciousness to do other sort of freaky things. This is just on a real practical level. Okay, I want to save $1 million, or I want to do this. Who would I have to become? And then developing that ability to go, okay, I'm going to do this, and then
start doing the work.
And start doing the work. Because sometimes you will have the idea, oh, I'll do this, and you'll be in the situation to do it. But if you haven't done the work, you will get a learning or an opportunity to learn. And so, again, when we go through this, the problems that you experience along the way to becoming the person that can do the thing actually teach you to be the person to get the result. And so, again, you can reverse engineer a lot of these processes. And we're still just scratching the surface. We're just kind of talking.
We're playing the first attention still.
Yeah, we're just kind of. So your identity is there to keep you safe. So if we looked at each of the 7, so when we talk about things, we generally label them, like to communicate. We're not yet, or I'm not yet at that stage where I can just be in someone's presence and have silent transmission of knowledge. I'm working on it, but I don't believe I'm yet at that point where I can instantly transfer an insight. In order to help expand someone's point of view, we tend to use language as one of the methods of communication. We can visually demonstrate, we can architect different experiences, but it's helpful to label things. And so when we're talking about identity and consciousness and the relationship between, consciousness and your experience, the label of identity, or who am I, from a naming, means that we can communicate with each other. So it's probably helpful at this point if we were to say the 7 attentions and I said the first attention, the second attentions, and so on, and start to expand on the labels so that it gives the listeners a way in to sort of contemplate what the fuck we're talking about, because otherwise it's like what the actual fuck. So just general labels that I would give the first attention are, it's like your identity. It's based on your personal history, and it's the primary way we're looking through the world. So each of these attentions are like a level of consciousness. So the second attention is where you start to notice more details around either the thing that you're thinking of or the thing that you're witnessing. So it's not just the label. Okay, that's a computer, that's a chair, that's a light. I've labeled it and then I dismiss it. It's like if I say, someone starts saying something and I say, oh yeah, I know, I've blocked out what he was telling me. And so I'm still in the first attention. I'm not connected to what he's saying. If I can open myself to the details and actually connect to that, I have a greater opportunity to really understand where they're at. So the second attention is your thoughts, but it's the submodalities of your thoughts. So it's the actual words, the language, the pitch of your voice, the tone, and like if we're talking about describing things, it's like color, it's the perspective. If I'm going into a memory, for example, am I remembering it from my first person, or am I watching the experience from outside my body? So the second attention, when you start to get into the details. So first attention, it is designed really to keep you safe. The second attention, we're really looking at this need for variety. So if we look at each of the attentions, they also have a archetypal human need that's operating when you understand it. So the first attention, what it's doing, the need is certainty and safety. Whereas the second attention, it's more things that are different or new. So people who tend to spend more time in the second attention, like personality-wise, are more adventurous and more outgoing, and tend to want to learn more things. And so if we were to give it a label, the first attention is your identity, second attention is thought, third attention is feeling. And it's not what they are, I'm just labeling them, okay? So third attention is these emotional assemblage point that we have in our body, where we have this sense of varying degrees of pleasure and pain, of wanted or not wanted. So we have a sense of facing or focus when we start to understand the third attention. So meaning I could be talking about something, but I'm talking about the opposite of what I actually want. And so when you start to hear and listen to what people are saying, sometimes they're facing the wrong direction in their language. They're talking about the thing that they don't want. And so by focusing on the details of what they don't want, they're creating the reality of what they don't want. And so again, all of these things, as you start to unpack them in terms of the fourth attention, we're really talking about the rules, like the beliefs, the values, it's the meaning we are assigning to it. It's the context. It's kind of the this plus that equals, and the equals, once we agree with it, it becomes a program, like a pattern that we then apply to tell us how to feel. Because if you change the context of the meaning, your physiology changes. And
absolutely.
So I like to tell a kind of a good story, a good example to illustrate this. And this actually happened. Let's say you go to a restaurant and or a cafe, and the food is ordered, and it's a sandwich, and I cut the sandwich in half, and I give the sandwich to my friend, and I'm eating the sandwich, and we're both eating the same sandwich. And I'm like, man, this tastes beautiful. It's like awesome. And then my friend throws up, spits everything out, and actually physically ill. I'm like, what the actual fuck? We're both eating the same thing. It's delicious to me. And he's like, there's pork in it. And my friend is Jewish. And so he has a belief that has caused a massive physiological reaction, even though, you know, like we're both, it's not, well, so far as I know, not poisonous. He had like an actual visceral reaction. And so this is just kind of just an insight into when you truly believe something and it actually becomes something that you take to heart. And if we were to sort of orient where the attentions emanate, you can sort of use the chakra system as well. There's a direct correlation between them. If you take something to heart as a meaning, that totally tells you how things will make you feel. And so the fourth attention is those beliefs, those values, those agreements that you've taken to heart. And so the fifth
quite often, Jez, sorry,
go for
the
it.
fourth attention there, because it's something, again, you know, we talk about quite a fair bit, and I think, I don't know where I got this from. It's either, I think maybe a Sydney Banks quote or a Michael McNair quote around we don't live in the experience of our circumstances, we live in the experience of our thought.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, quite often what I'll do with people, and I'll say, especially people who've had trauma, I'll say, well, let's go back to a time in the past and back to an event. And I'll draw this because people are visual, as you know.
Yeah.
A lot of people are visual. And I'll just put a little box there on the exit, and I'll just say, okay, that's the event. That has no negative or positive things. It's just an event. But depending on where you sit emotionally right now in the future, right, if you're happy or you're sad, the story behind that event will change.
Yep.
And I'll say to them, what's real? And they kind of go, oh, what I'm thinking about. And I said, yeah. And then depending on how you feel, that whole reality about that event will change dramatically.
Yeah.
And this is that's sort of my segue into the fact of reality is what actual reality
as a human experience.
Yeah.
As a human experience, it's integrated. It's inseparable from our perception of it.
Yeah. And it's funny because you look at people and just on that state of awareness they're in at that time, they can look back at the past event and change the reality in a moment.
The possibilities
and the people kind of go, oh, Jesus. That's what I say is what part of your life is real? Because if you have a different state of awareness, you can change that right now. What happened 15 years ago. And there's just people's minds start exploding at this stage, right? Because they start knowing the fact that reality is completely fluid.
It is, but you do have to take in consideration the relationship between those feelings and the body. So long as you're addressing that those, because you may come out of that realization, but the body hasn't caught up.
Correct.
So you may still need to do work or embodiment or somatic release, or there's different things that you may need to do to get your body to get up to speed with what your consciousness is.
Especially with trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something else that we haven't got to yet, but then where the trauma is held inside your body and the energy, like I said, in the chakras, all that stuff. Yes, exactly. So,
yeah. Well, like your body remembers. And so we have a, an incredible sensory system that, again, by evolution or design, it's, we've got our 5 senses and we've got our thinking. And that is literally encoding data and detail literally into your body. And so when we have those peak experience, whether they're peak pleasure or, painful or trauma, it doesn't even have to be a pain. It could be just the meaning we've made and, the physiological reactions. Yeah, that they can absolutely encode the body. And inadvertently then as you're going through life, again, because as we mentioned with the first attention, you might be getting triggered by things that are similar enough for your body to go around particular circumstances and situations. So So yeah, it is useful to go back to those events, but you do also have to be mindful that sometimes there actually needs to be a physiological release. It's not just an intellectual reframing. You can go and change the perspective of the memory. You can make it black and white. You can shrink it. You can make another person a cartoon character. You can play it backwards. You can cut it out and put you can install a new memory and then go into your body and live the new memory. But your body still has this record. And so, I guess you just have to have a level of wisdom around methodology that enables that integration of those experiences in such a way that it facilitates healing and wholeness. And really the trick to sort of, and there's many different modalities around that, and incredible work being done. Really the trick is in recognizing those triggers. Like if you're getting triggered by something, learning different methods to go back through the trigger to explore it, and face whatever it is that's coming up with it. And so the process, using the first 5 of the attentions, even just naming the event or the emotion, you could say, oh, that's fear, or that's I'm feeling anxious. And then having some details. Where are you feeling anxious? Oh, I'm feeling it here, or I'm feeling it here. What's the story behind it? Okay, wow. And then they may tell the story about the situation that was the trigger. So I did this, and the person shouted at me or whatever. And what should have they have done? Well, they shouldn't have raised their voice at me, or they shouldn't. And when you hear people saying their shoulds or their musts or their whatever, what you're hearing is insight into the rules that they're using to make meaning of the situation. And sometimes, yes, you can reframe the meaning then, and that can be like all that's needed. And other times what you can do is you can ask simple questions like, when was the first time that and then you name the emotion. And that gives them a chance to go back through their timeline for any of these previous experiences in their personal history where the same resonance of the emotion was present. And then if it's appropriate, because it may or not be appropriate, and maybe the client doesn't want to do that type of work, but if it's appropriate and it's something that they want to do and that it may have some value, you may revisit that through many different methods, where they then resolve the root event, somatically release in different ways, and then reframe to a new agreement or a new meaning or a new something that promotes wholeness and new choices. But even just something as simple as naming the emotion, and you can there's different tricks you can do. So you can say to the client, because I believe the emotions are super intelligent. Like they're all emotions are valid, even the most negative emotions. They are there for a reason. So if a person's fear is coming up, or whatever the emotion is that they name, it's actually totally reasonable and valuable and honorable, and it's part of their super intelligent system giving them information. And so you could say, look, just play a game with me. Let's say if we could give your emotion a microphone, what would it say to you? What's the message that it wants to tell you? And give the client a chance to actually speak as the message of the fear.
I used that once, and it was she kept going and going and going. Something like that is seriously brilliant, because just that it's symbology as well too, that you're giving him a voice to speak through, right? And that on a subconscious level is by you handing him a microphone, visually or not, but
just the metaphor.
You're giving him permission to talk, right? And even that, so sometimes it's just bang.
Yeah, but that's good.
Out.
That's good.
Yeah, the release.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where's the fifth? Where's
So basically the fifth attention is the moment of now. So it's your body experiencing the present moment. So time space as it's unfolding is doing it through the fulcrum of you. So your body is the manifold of the unfolding universe in the present moment. So the fifth attention is literally this moment by moment by moment by moment now. So it's what you do, it's your actions. In terms of the people who like being in the moment, they tend to love challenge and look for, progress or, adrenaline. But the fifth attention really is the unfolding moment of now. So if we were to look at the fourth, the third, the second, and the first, they are very mind. Like they're very mental, like your beliefs. Okay, even emotions, okay, they are physiological. Right through to your identity, like they're kind of like a mental thing. But the moment of now, all of that's happening through you, through your body. So the fifth attention really is like what is actually happening right now. And so if we were to look at what the need is, say for the first, we know that's for safety and security, certainty. The second attention is for variety, often involved with our sexual attraction as well, in terms of how our attention gets directed. The third attention is really about status and significance. So that not just where our focus is drawn, but who we are being in the relationship to the significance of that, but also our own status. So people that you can understand people's behavior and what they're doing based on that need, for example. The fourth attention really is around congruence, like alignment. So our beliefs, when you look at what's going on, people are behaving in a way to be congruent with the belief that they have. So there's this need for belonging, and it's often tied up in your sort of congruence with whatever the agreement is. The fifth attention is around, progress and challenge. So each of them have a need. I could go through all of them and go through different patterns of people. So I don't know how deep you want to go. Like the first attention, some people tend to notice, and I kind of mentioned before, sameness or difference. And some people predominantly look for differences with some sameness, and some look for predominantly sameness with some difference. And that shows up in how they behave and how they relate to things. Then in their language, for example, you will have a deeper, like the submodalities of how they're processing reality. They may be more visual, they may be more kinesthetic, they may be, more auditory. So again, in their language and how all of those modalities of how they're not just that for themselves, but how they are showing up in their behavior, those patterns you'll start to hear, they're more visual, or they'll be doing things. First they'll go visual, then they'll go feeling, then they'll go, so you'll start to see these patterns. The third attention, you'll start to see how people are looking more towards people, places, things, information. So they might be a people person, they might be a place person, they might be. So again, there's all these patterns, these that are anchored within each of these when you start to go into it, that help you understand, okay, not just people want to be safe, and some people want to experience more adventure, whereas some people, okay, they just love routine, they're more conservative and they just do the same thing day and day. You can see those things play out. But there's even just looking at the seven attention, this is not even talking about the masculine and feminine dynamics.
Yes.
Because each attention does tend to have a masculine and feminine expression that can be mapped. And again, these are just patterns that show up. So the fifth attention, it's really the unfolding moment of now. And so one of the funny things when you start to realize what's happening in the moment of now, and this can be one of those sort of maybe extraordinary, or it's not an ordinary sense, you do have those opportunities to have a sense of flow, like a flow state, like you're in the moment. Those sorts of things can be, like a super state. But you by different methods, you can become aware that the what you're made of, there is an infiniteness going on that is not linear in terms of time space, meaning your perception of what's happening is not limited to your ordinary perception of time. And when you start to have these experiences, or you recognize this, that is one of the sort of doorways for people to realize that they're not their body, they're not their mind, there's some other part of their awareness that is able to potentially see possible futures, or alternatives that you can't necessarily see from your identity, normal rational thinking, that by whether it's evolution or design, there's a mind that is at play going on within everything, that is coordinating just mind-boggling interactions. But it's not actually, even though our perception of it from the human perspective is as a line of time, it's actually not. So there's some weird stuff going on. And again, sometimes you enter these altered states, or you remove, sort of your perception shifted, where you can perceive different potential timelines or past timelines, sometimes past lives. Like you have a perception or an insight that it's not just your own timeline, but it's, past timelines. Sometimes you do this type of work as well. And you can go into other people's timelines. So it's very interesting at this point. So in terms of, if we were to give these archetypal elemental labels, we could say that the present moment is the void unfolding into manifest. What's unmanifest made manifest in real time, as the universe is unfolding. That's an aspect of what could be labeled the void, because all possible futures, all possible pasts are present within whatever is unfolding. And we probably don't have the scope or the time to go down the quantum physics rabbit hole.
Well,
but quick insight for you, Jeremy. The square in the middle is, for us, is one of the 5 dimensions, and like the Book of 5 Rings, the void.
There you go.
So
there's a direct correlation. So the fourth attention's air, third attention's, which your emotions, is fire, water for thought, and for your identity and how you're perceiving the reality is earth. And so again, it's a very old way of explaining the relationship between the mind and the body and the world around us and the universe as it's unfolding. But if you have the label and then you look for what's behind it, then you have like a better chance of understanding what it's actually meaning, as opposed to, it's earth or rock or water, and then you've quantified and defined it. But really what we're talking about is there's some, each of those are like a portal to levels of vibration that,
so I think we're at a point here, we're about to go off the cliff, especially with the 6th and 7th attention.
Yeah.
And we are smack out of time for this time, because what I don't want to do, Jez, is actually rush this part, because this is the really good shit. And this is the juicy part. And this is the part that gets us into the stuff that, we all love, which is consciousness and the nature of reality and all that stuff. So I think for our listeners, we've covered the first 5 attentions, and they really do, like you said, they really relate to, those areas and, around thoughts and identity and body and the elements, and you've packaged up really well. But we're at this threshold, aren't we? it's about to go.
Well, it could. We could direct it in different ways. We could say, well, how do we apply this to business, or how do we apply this in a practical sense for our life? Maybe we've lived a great life and we don't have any particular pressing triggers or trauma that we need to work on, but we still, we could take it all sorts of different directions.
So just as a high level thing, because I think we're going to have to get you on again at some stage, because we're pushing the boundaries of time at the moment. 6 and 7 in just a very briefly, but we will get you back on and we'll talk specifically about straight in the listeners. No intro. Jez, level 6 or 7th attention.
Did you want me to address them at all now, or just leave it
very briefly?
Okay.
Very briefly.
So a way of thinking about this, to contemplate it. So the idea of let's do this in the reverse to a certain extent. Let's go from the 7th down. So the idea of the 7th attention is really this concept of, whether you call it God, the absolute, the infinite, the divine mind. There's been many different labels, Allah, that get placed on this. It's, the infiniteness that we're a part of. There is nothing outside of it. There's, it's before time, it's beyond time. And again, all of these things, when you start trying to label it, we fall very short.
It's a human construct.
Yeah.
It's all exercise.
So we're basically talking about the divine nature of reality. And so when we look at the divine nature of reality, and then the human soul, the divine nature of reality is experiencing the human soul so that it can explore the full range of its own potentiality. So when we have this idea of the 7th and the 6th, basically it's a way for the divine nature to witness itself. So it creates a single point. And so if we were to think about, like, before things become dimensional, like it's not a straight line, it's not up, not down, but it's a single point of awareness. And it is the same, or an extension of this, again, we don't have the words for it, this infinite nature. This single point of awareness, witnessing itself, seeing the divine nature, is what opens up the void. So the act of this experience that we're having is the divine through us witnessing itself into form. And so from there, we've gone 7th, 6th, 5th, in terms of the formation from nothingness into the world, and potentially many worlds, many multiple universes that can be experienced.
Multi-universe, yes. That's another question.
So in terms of the tracking the experience, what we're talking about is the divine nature of God and our personal human expression, and the relationship between that coming into form and then having a mappable mind that is creating the experience that we are having. The 7 attentions is basically a reverse engineering of that as a map. It's not like the 7 attentions is not what it is, but it's a way of mapping it so that we can have a partly retarded conversation about it. Okay, using labels which are
partly coherent, partly retarded.
Yeah, because so the other way of that would be then unfolding it back to being God. So instead of looking at the act of creation coming into the experience that we're having, is being able to reverse engineer back to the infinite. And so you can, it's a two-way, it's like a conduit. And when you start to recognize what's going on, the energy play can be, and the labels again, they're just labels. You could say yin and yang, or masculine and feminine, light and dark. There's these expressions of each of these, with the exception of God, that is the absolute. So the yin and the yang, that's or dissolved back to the infinite singularity, or whatever the heck that is. Your single point has both masculine and feminine expression. And how that comes into form through your experience has very clear masculine and feminine archetypes that, again, can be mapped. And when we learn to witness those, we can start to recognize in our lives when we are in or out of our natural flow of life force.
Alignment, yeah.
And again, there's many different methods for this. Like the 7 attentions is not the only way of starting to have this sort of conversation. It's just my particular experience, and then me trying to create language and a pattern around how to explain what the heck was going on. It's just a way of having that conversation. So yeah, so that's sort of hopefully that's a bit of an you know, but it is a big subject. And you know, sometimes because we're talking around it, we've given a few different examples. Hopefully there's enough for the listeners to have something to go by. It is useful to have a image, like when you have the map of this, how I draw it out, and you can draw it out a few different ways. Sometimes having that visually and then going through that, it's like, okay, that makes sense. Maybe seeing a few different diagrams and that, where you can go, oh, okay, that's where it is. And then applying it to something like, you know, what was an emotional event that happened, you know, okay, and then label the event and then go through the details and how did that make you feel? And then, you know, what should have happened? What must have happened? You know, and then you can actually practically apply it and go, oh, fuck, that's how I made this experience of reality. I can actually, we can reverse engineer the process.
Yeah. That's the powerful thing with your stuff, mate, is that there's a lot of stuff out there that is very, very simple or very hard. The thing about yours, it's dynamic, right? It can be as deep as it wants, but it can be as simple as it needs to be.
It is a rabbit hole. It is a
and it continues to evolve.
Yeah, like there are elements of it that I'm still getting deeper insights into. The fractal nature of it is one of the ones where, like, if I sit in the 7th attention, if I sit in the 1st attention as Jeremy in my identity and I label the 7, I'm looking at them from Jeremy's identity at the 7 with a label. But then when I go into the details of them, it's like, again, playing a different octave. Then even though I'm looking at all seven now actually have a slightly different level of functionality. And then when I move up another one, all 7 do a different level of functionality, and then all 7 again. So it can be a bit, when you start to see this fractal nature of it, everything's within everything.
Yep.
You can get lost very, very quickly. So for me anyway, it's been useful to just keep myself sort of maybe sane. Maybe I'm a bit insane, I don't know, but it's been useful as a tool for mapping it. And really, at the end of the day, the map is only as useful as your ability to get somewhere. And so, you know, in you know, truthfulness, I hope that those people that do want to explore this thing or listening to this, that the value is not the map. Okay, the map is just a map, but the value is, where does it take you? What predictable experiences, or where you know the listener applies it or takes it. That's really the
curiosity.
value of it.
Because, I love it. I love this. Yeah.
That's like we said, we're here for the experience. You know,
that's right.
Yeah.
You know,
this is the gift.
Beautiful. So I appreciate the time you're giving me space to talk shit.
Oh, we love it. We could just sit and listen.
We could go all night. We might just keep going.
We're really just scratching the surface. And again, it's Yeah, it's a mountain. It is a mountain. When you start getting
Yeah.
into it, like you can spend a long time unpacking it.
Yeah.
And then
There's
unpacking it and applying it to your own life. Like that's
that's the key.
It's never
Yeah.
ending.
I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll get there. I'm sure there is a conversation which is going to get as weird as all shit. And I don't think it's too far around the corner. So,
Quite possibly.
Right,
we kept it pretty tame today, actually.
Yeah,
I know,
it wasn't
I know.
too bad.
That
Got a little bit
was
sidetracked once or twice, but it was pretty
all right.
good.
But
Pretty easy.
Cheers, no, thanks, mate. Thanks for coming on. That's really appreciate spending your time and sharing, your experience and the seven's attentions and what you do. Because I think but for the people I know that are out there, and I know quite a lot of people, mate. You're one of the very, very few people I actually trust in this real spiritual industry. And just for me to even, whether it's divine fate, we live in the same area, 5-6 k's away from each other. I don't know what it is, but
no coincidences.
Right. So, look, I'm just you're valuable to even be able to share this space with you. So thanks for spending your time with us. And I know Michael's probably the same thing. It's just got a wealth of knowledge, mate, and the more people who sort of have access to this, the world can change.
Beautiful. Well, it's an honor, and maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Cool.
Thank
All
you,
right,
brother.
guys.
Beautiful.
If you just again, we want to subscribe to our podcast, please do. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube link, it is down in the link below. And we would love to hear your comments, feedback from this. If you want to hear more from Jez, I do anyway. So I'm just going to bug him until he comes on again. And we will see you in the next episode. So goodbye for now.